Why do game devs keep copying Overwatch? It's not like it's fun. I know what many of you are probably expecting, based on my previous content. Oh great, another brainless TF2 YouTuber who's gonna say Overwatch bad, TF2 good. But I need to tell you guys a secret. I am really bored of this game. TF2 is just old, okay? And I get bored because there hasn't been anything new in so long. And I'm not counting Scout having blue pants for 2 days as something new. So I did what most people do when they get bored of the game they're playing. I looked for similar games. I went onto Steam into the class-based shooter category.
That's not what they're called!
Oh, I'm sorry, a Blizzard employee with a gun just showed up and pointed it at my head. What I meant to say was hero shooter. So I went onto Steam to find games that were similar to Team Fortress 2, similar class-based shooters. They just kind of don't exist. There are so many other class-based shooters on Steam, and all of them are copying Overwatch. And I mean, you know when like something comes out that you like, but then like it's too popular, so everybody in the industry starts copying them, and soon the very obvious genre styles start to be really grating on you and you end up hating the original? Yeah, that's what Overwatch did with class-based shooters. The decision among corporate CEOs is unanimous. The best way to be the next big thing is to be the last big thing. It's a little known fact that 99% of Mario killers stop just before they become more popular than Mario. Like it or not, Overwatch is the template for modern class-based shooters, and there's a lot of things that it does that make it a really bad template. Things that are now standard and expected that really shouldn't be. And for me, number one on that list is class roles. The 3 Overwatch class roles of damage, tank, and healer are in basically every new class-based shooter that comes out. You see, there are certain tropes of the first-person shooter genre that devs seem to think they have to have. You have to have aim down sights, you have to have a headshot multiplier, you have to have sprinting, and now, if you're a class-based shooter, you have to have the 3 class roles. They don't even consider if it would actually be good for the type of game they're making, it's just the genre standard at this point. Okay, let's take a game that was made before the Overwatch influence on class-based shooters. Garden Warfare 2. Yes, we are going to be talking about the funny kids plant game. Deal with it. The game is actually good, and it introduced a lot of things to the genre that Overwatch stole the credit for. Garden Warfare is actually a really good example to use for this, because it was made after Team Fortress, but before Overwatch, so it acts as sort of a transitional period. So looking at Garden Warfare, each team has 7 character options. Each team has 1 support, 1 tank DPS hybrid, and everybody else is DPS. And that is the same with Team Fortress 2. Heavy is a tank DPS hybrid, and Medic is the only support. And that ratio might seem wrong and backwards to some of you, but that actually lines up really well with what classes the average person wants to play. There's a big problem with making a role that roughly 5 out of 6 people in the game want to be playing, and limiting that to 2 out of 6 people. I mean, role queue itself has been basically just a massive big red flashing sign that says, well, we failed. And I think the big issue that Overwatch created that other game devs are mindlessly emulating is the entire existence of the tank role. That might seem like a backwards opinion to you because the support role has always been less popular than the tank. I mean, seriously, they are really doing anything they possibly can to try and get you to play this role. But the issue with the tank is bigger, because the tank really doesn't need to exist. To understand what I mean, let me break down what the roles do. Damage, unsurprisingly, does damage, support undoes damage by healing, and the tank takes damage. And there's not really an argument against this. Tank literally means to take damage. You tank a hit. And I'm sorry, but this is just less engaging than doing damage or undoing damage. Because I'm sorry, but the platonic ideal of the Overwatch tank is a character that gets basically 0 kills and spends the entire game getting shot at. I'm not saying that's how the Overwatch tank functions in the game. I'm saying that's how the Overwatch tank functions from a role perspective, how it functions on paper as a concept. The only reason why tanks do end up getting kills, and frankly why healers end up getting kills, is because the Overwatch devs realized fairly quickly most people don't want to play them, so they quickly started encroaching on the DPS design space. And just to be clear, I have no problem with Overwatch having tanks in it. I like the fact that Overwatch has the 3 different class roles. My issue is when other games mindlessly copy the Overwatch formula without thinking of what the average player would want. And I just need to get it out of the way because I know for a fact someone's gonna say it. Squid-Boy, if you don't think the tank role is fun, then you can just not play it. It's that simple. Well, if only that was true, then I'd be happy. The issue with this line of reasoning is that picking tanks is a meta option. It is the most effective tactic available. Look, no one liked playing double shield either, but as much as people didn't like playing double shield, what they liked even less was losing to double shield, getting steamrolled by double shield, so they ended up playing double shield anyways. Tanks are similar to that. If one team has 2 tanks on it and the other team has 4 DPS, the team with the 2 tanks are gonna utterly steamroll the other team, and getting steamrolled isn't fun. So we get to the classic Overwatch dilemma, the dilemma that happens every 5 minutes while you play the game. Well, yeah, I don't really want to play this character, they're not that fun for me, but as unfun as they are to me, losing the match in 2 minutes all while being spawn camped the entire game is less fun than that, so I guess playing the character I don't like is the more fun option. And the worst part is, the tank role itself is an invention of Overwatch. You see, earlier I mentioned that I think the tanks in Garden Warfare and Heavy in Team Fortress 2 aren't tanks, they're tank DPS hybrids. And that's because the Overwatch tank is actually a pretty rare archetype. Before Overwatch, the standard idea of a tank was a character who had a lot of health, did a lot of damage, but was really slow. The Overwatch tank is not any slower than the other characters, so it has a lot of health, but because it can't just have more health and the same damage, it does less damage. It's what's called a brick wall. And there's a reason this is a pretty rare archetype in most video games. Because think about it, if you have double the health but do half the damage, you basically have the same ratios for everything. It just, everything takes longer, so most people won't want to play it. But of course that changes in a team setting. You see, in shooters, flanking is a really big aspect of gameplay, and flanking basically just means you surprise your enemy. You get the first few shots before them. And that's why there's the difference between tanks and damage. Doing more damage means you'll have a more effective flank, but having more health means a flank will be less effective against you. And let me be clear right now, that example I was talking about, I'm basically lying to you. The Overwatch tank does not have double the health and half the damage like I led you to believe. No, the truth is much stupider. The Overwatch tank has more than double the health and more than half the damage. And I'm sure some of you Einsteins in my audience, Wait, actually, no, never mind. It's my audience. I wouldn't have those. But anyway, some of you might realize that the math is kind of off here. Having more than double the health and having more than half the damage just makes the tank better than the DPS. And you're 100% right. Why do you think the Overwatch meta for so long was 3 tanks, 3 support, and 0 damage? And the best part is, instead of actually balancing the game so that the 3 roles were as important as each other, the Overwatch devs just went, screw it, let's just have role queue, force them into being in the positions we want them to. But why did this happen, you might ask? How did this obvious mistake happen, where the tanks have a bigger health boost and they have a damage decrease? You see, somewhere along the development line, the devs realized that people didn't like playing tank as much as they liked DPS. But because the balance of the game requires that everyone plays every class role in equal amounts, they had to intentionally encroach on the design principles of the damage class role into the tank so people would actually play them in relative equal amounts to the DPS. And that's the core problem with the Overwatch class roles. It expects the average person to want to play every class role an equal amount, but that's just not true. I think Overwatch committed the cardinal sin here. They were designing a competitive game first and a casual game second. They balanced the game around what they would like the high-end competitive scene to be, rather than what the average player would want it to be. Games like Team Fortress 2 and Garden Warfare 2 expect a support to damage ratio of about 5 damage to 1 support, and the game is designed to be balanced in that way. And if you look at the average players per class, that's pretty on the money. Medic is exactly in the middle of class popularity, and Garden Warfare is similar. It expects about 1 in 6 players to be support. And then you compare this to Overwatch, which not only expects twice as many players to play the support medic role, but then they also expect half of the remaining players to play the statistically less liked tank role. I think it says a lot about Overwatch that the community's biggest meme ever is literally about not being able to play the characters you want because of team composition.
Maybe I'll be Tracer.
I'm already Tracer.
What about Widowmaker?
I'm already Widowmaker.
I'll be Bastion.
Nerf Bastion.
You're right, so Winston.
I wanna be Winston.
I guess I'll be Genji.
I'm already Genji.
Then I'll be McCree.
I already chose McCree.
I would just like to state how sorry I am for showing you guys that. I hadn't seen that video in a while, and frankly, I forgot how irritating and annoying it was, so I'm sorry.
I think there's someone hanging right there.
So I ask developers, if players are statistically having more fun with this 5-to-1 damage support ratio, why aren't you making your games with it? I mean, I think I know what a large part of the answer is. You see, there's a certain stigma in game development against quote-unquote going backwards. I mean, think about why games keep adding riot shields and landmines, despite the vast majority of the player base hating both of those. It's because simply not having them is seen as going backwards. It doesn't matter if less people are having fun. As the saying goes, more is more. Having more stuff means your game is better. Let's add crafting and an open world and a hacking minigame to every game that really doesn't need it. I think it says a lot about the gaming industry right now that the games being lauded as creative and innovative aren't the games that keep adding piles and piles of new things. They're the games that remove things. Games like Doom Eternal and Ultra Kill are critical darlings, and they got there by removing things. They removed aim down sights. They removed reloading. They removed an open hub world. They removed things that had become standard. Things that are added simply because, well, that's what's in video games. I think a lot of people forget that Team Fortress 2 actually had less content than Team Fortress 1 on release. They removed grenades because people found them unfun. They removed armor because people found them unfun. They removed many of the additional secondary weapons the characters had that they realistically never used. People need to realize that sometimes less really is more.